So I bought a mug, and it's a Kafra mug, and in that mug I have a piece of paper that's rolled up like a scroll, and I have a pen, a Republic Bank pen. And the three items together tell a story of my coming out. I guess the first time I had to come out at all was in a workspace, and I was very fortunate to be working at CAFRA, which was a feminist organization. A few years later, I decided to come out to my family, and librarian that I am, I decided to write letters to my parents and my siblings. So that's what my rolled up piece of paper symbolizes, me writing these letters. And then the third time, it's not that I had to, but I chose to. And it was exactly at the end of my career at Republic Bank. I'd worked there for about 18 years. I waited until my retirement function because I felt that it was the right moment to disclose to my former bosses and my peers. And that's what that Republic Bank pen symbolizes.
I think that I've always been out. But today I brought a camera, a 35mm SLR camera. And that camera is significant to me because it was one of the earliest cameras that I started using to take images of events within the community. But I believe that my volume of work that I've been curating for the past 2 decades and more, it would live on for future generations. And also it will help add the beautiful tapestry, the colorful tapestry that is our history.
So the item I brought in was my first team football jersey. And it signifies a shift for me in the way that I was perceived by others at school and sometimes in my community. Form 1 was a terrible year for me. Endless bullying, it was merciless. And once I joined the football team, I think people began to understand why, or at least it gave them a reason for why I was acting the way that I was acting, like why I wasn't as girly as the rest of the girls in my class. And also I got this group of friends like throughout the school. It made school infinitely better for me.
So I brought in my journal, and why I brought in this item is because gender for me has been such a personal journey. I have looked around at like different guidelines or what it means to be trans, what gender means to different people. And as illuminating that has been, I have not been able to find what works for me. What my journey has really been about sort of a conversation with myself and getting my thoughts on paper and being able to journal has really allowed me to discover who I am, explore who I am, and figure out what my identity means to me.
I immediately thought about my hair, which was difficult to bring in because it's a part of who I am. But in my journey, when I was growing up as a boy in my family, I had to cut my hair until eventually I started working. At the age of 16, I started working and paying my bills, and I was like, now that I have some kind of financial stability, I am going to fight for my hair. However, I also brought in my earrings because piercing my ears was a part of feeling more comfortable in expressing in a more feminine way, even though getting piercings is not innately feminine.
I would say a huge misconception about transgender people is that there's a set framework for what it means to be trans, when at the end of the day, being trans just means you do not identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. And that can mean so many things for different people. There's a misconception that, there's, okay, you get medical care and you want to be this, or you might experience dysphoria, or you might dislike your body and you want to be this thing, you want to transition from something to something else. And honestly, it's very, very personal to people. Everyone's journey is different. So when you're interacting with a trans person, there's just no way to know what that journey was for them. It really is up to the person.
So like the misconception was that nobody else was like this. If you were like this, you were a weirdo, you were a freak. And I think now, people understand that we exist and understand that there are more of us. The younger ones coming up know that there's a community that they can fall into. So I'm happy for them. I really am, because it was lonely.
So there is a lot of discourse in our contemporary climate around the alphabet mafia. If people don't know what that means, it's just that us LGBTQI plus people are constantly adding a new label, a new sexuality, a new gender. But the reality is that language is an ever-evolving thing. We give meaning to words that never existed. However, these experiences have always existed. We're just creating language to bridge that gap between people who may not experience the way and the world that we live in, so that they understand what we mean when we say who we are.
When I think about misconceptions of the community, one of the things that comes to mind is this sort of pervasive view that being LGBT is something that people actively choose.
Yes.
And for me, it is much more complicated than that.
It is.
I mean, when I think about my own journey, I think of a very heterosexual childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, and then I fell in love with a woman.
Yes.
And that set me on a different path.
Okay. For me, there are lots of misconceptions that have been labeled on the community, but I would hone in on the fact that, you know, they always believe that because, you know, of our lifestyle, we always want to be promiscuous, we always want to be sleeping with every person that we encounter. So that, you know, that is a fallacy. Young people today, they're out. They have no reason, you know, to hide or anything like that. They're just out. And I'm so happy when I see them celebrating themselves, you know, without a care in the world. And I oftentimes say, you know, I wish that, you know, more persons in our time could have experienced the freedom that these young people are experiencing now. But it would be interesting, you know, for them to come and give their take on, you know, what they're experiencing now. Yeah.
I agree with you. I find them very confident in their sexuality. Very much unhesitant when it comes to labels. I might shy away from labels and labeling. They are very confident. I am X, Y, or Z, and I don't, you know, mince words about it.
I would say, so definitely we saw a big boom in like the past few years in labels and identities that people were more aware of. I think it's given us like a lot of people a point of contact for their community. So you have a label or a way of experiencing the world, and you can find other people who experience the world the same way and have similar experiences. And I think it has been really good in terms of finding community. I think before we just didn't have words, we just didn't have ways to describe ourselves, but now we are more visible and we can say, here I am, this is who I am, look at me.
So I believe that there's a transition from the older generation to us now with the existence of media, and social media specifically, because social media has allowed for an idea of what being queer or being trans means, specifically from Americanized media. So we have this idea of what being gay is or what being trans looks like. So now there is both a misconception of what that might look like, as well as a spotlight on anyone who might look that way. So when in the older generation, I would have a belief that someone can get away with being a bit more queer represented because it was not well known of what that might mean. But in our generation, there is no way of getting away from it. You're always going to have the issue of someone knowing what being queer or trans traditionally looks like, and that can cause issues with, you know, hate crimes or discrimination, prejudice, just by how you express or how you feel. So I think that's like a major point that needs to be brought up, that we have a lot of misconceptions, as well as being queer and trans is now spotlighted as an issue within our society.
They have an understanding now of what sexuality is. It's no longer considered to be like some kind of psychological abnormality. And so young people now can come into their own with an understanding that nothing is wrong with them, that they're okay, and they don't have to hate on themselves if they're in a community that's accepting. And it was so hard for me coming up to first name who I was, label it, understand it, then accept it. Like that took, I want to say 2 decades. You know, it took a really long time, and people are able now to, by 14, 15, understand who they are, research it, look it up, have a great conception of where they want to go and how they want their lives to look. And they have the ability to do that.